Thank you, Akio-san. So, what's your view on Beyond Asia? What's the kind of buzz that you are seeing here since as you come earlier as well?
Yes, I think everyone here, I think, would notice that this is not a Macau conference. This is not a Hong Kong conference. This is not even Shenzhen conference. This is actually Greater Bay Area conference. And I heard this word, I think maybe about a decade ago. At the time, I had no idea what that meant. But now I really starting to feel that I thought it was like a transportation project connecting the three areas. But now I'm beginning to see it's actually an economic development theme. And you have, Hong Kong, which always been the strongest financial center for this part of Asia. And then we have Macau, which is more, casino, entertainment, tourist destination. But Shenzhen, which was kind of industrial heartland of China. But when you combine these, you suddenly have like economy that can rival like California. And with the rise of Chinese tech scene, especially in areas like robotics, drone, and EV, suddenly this has actually become probably one of the top industrial regions in the world. And for me, Beyond is kind of a showcase of that and also helping rest of the world discover what's going on in this neighborhood.
So, Japan, back home is buzzing. Suddenly
Yes,
there is.
certainly. Since COVID.
Yeah. So what was the trigger? Was it a realization that Japan missed maybe the software bus after the dot-com boom? Because, not just startup scene. Japan has also liberalized the defense exports
Yes,
part.
yes.
So, what's really driving this whole change of attitude?
Yes. So I think in Japan, we used to have a very booming economy in the 80s. And from 90s for the next 30 years, we had kind of stagnant economy. We were still growing, but very, very slowly. And I think during this period, important changes happened. One is that the country, we still have large, big corporates that's still there, but we are no longer all dominated by it. The pockets of new openings emerged, which allowed startups and new businesses to actually flourish and actually even challenge some of the incumbents. I remember, this is like 20 years ago. I had a friend who, at the time, who joined a startup called DNA, which is a listed company in Japan now owns baseball. And he told me at the time he was so ashamed to tell his parent that he joined this company because it was a startup. And back then, it was considered if you join a startup instead of say Sony or some big established company, you're a failure. But something interesting happened. In the last 20 years, some of the big names which offered lifetime employment no longer was offering that. And in fact, some of them even collapsed. And like Sharp, that used to be an independent company, but now it's part of Foxconn. Um, so there's this myth of stability with large corporates have actually started to, disappear. And then at the same time, something interesting happened. I think this happened maybe right after COVID. When we were looking at the labor statistics, we found out average salary of VC-funded startups now exceeds average salary of like Japan's equivalent of Fortune 500. So finally, startup is no longer something you feel ashamed of joining, but it actually became a mainstream. And probably the most cultural representation of this is TV dramas. Look, if you're 20 years ago, if you look Japanese TV dramas, it always took place in the big corporate setting, right? And that was the norm. But today, we finally have popular TV dramas featuring startups. So we think that in popular culture even caught up. And lastly, the government attitude. For a long time, Japanese government only took care of the needs of the big corporates. But in the last decades, they realized, oh, how come Korea has more unicorns in Japan? Southeast Asia have more unicorns in Japan. Everybody else have more unicorns in Japan. And they realized because a country focused on the development of large corporate, they neglected the needs of startups. So they finally, in the last 10 years, started addressing this. So there's now more funding available. Some of the unfair business conditions for startups changed. And you mentioned even defense. Previously, you had to be like Mitsubishi Heavy Industries to bid for defense contract. But now Ministry of Defense is starting to open up, of course, not for heavy, warplanes and stuff like that, but for smaller procurement, allowing startups to bid for it. So we're actually starting to see opening up of the government, more supportive, and actually one of the, I think, most important thing, at least from my perspective, is that 20 years ago, let's say you're a startup fund in Tokyo, you took chances, you created a new business, and you failed. Now, what happened is back then, if your startup had debt, the founder was actually personally guaranteeing it. So you'd probably have to personally declare personal bankruptcy, which in Japan meant you can never borrow money again, and that you're not allowed to become a public company CEO.
And your probably social status, the society also has gone.
Yes, yeah, like no one wants to touch you. But the government actually told banks that's no longer acceptable. So today, finally, startups can get venture debt without providing personal financial guarantee and without like providing your home as a mortgage to your company loan, which used to happen, by the way.
Right.
So the whole environment, I think, changed, and I think Japan is finally entering or catching up this age of startups.
So, I mean, you mentioned about funding. So, what's the ecosystem like? Because obviously, when you look at mature startup places like Silicon Valley, that has a one particular model. Then, of course, China has a different model, which is more state driven.
Yeah.
So, given the fact that Japan has had these large corporations, successful corporations, are they investing into startups? I mean, are they becoming accelerators or incubators in startups?
So Japan has actually developed its own VC ecosystem. It's still evolving. So if you go to about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, there weren't that many VCs. But today, Japan has actually a VC ecosystem, but it's a little bit different from US. It's a bit different from China. So at the seed stage, finally, Japan has produced enough entrepreneurs, and some of them with past exits. So we have now finally a pool of angels, usually former tech entrepreneurs who's like investing their own personal money into startups. And then layer above, we have institutional VCs like us, and there's actually quite a few of them now finally. 20 years ago, there's like only a handful of such VCs, but now we have good number of early stage VCs. And along with that, we also have a large number of corporate VCs, CVCs, that's how we call it in Japan. And I believe majority of public companies in Japan have their own VC department. So this capital pool actually provides good funding availability for Japanese startups. Now, what's still missing is late stage. We have some late stage VCs, but compared to say ecosystems in US and China, we're still lacking. And that's one of the things I think government is trying to fulfill now with different policies.
What about family offices? I mean, some of the rich families, are they now open to investing into startups?
Yes, family office, Japan came to this scene bit late. Singapore and Hong Kong, I think you have much bigger family office culture. Japan is just happening. So I would give it maybe 5, 10 more years, and maybe you have a sizable pool of family. There are some notable family offices, like founders of big tech companies like Rakuten. Even Nintendo family has their own family office, but still not as common as say markets like Hong Kong and Singapore.
So, do you feel that over the next 5 years, all the roads will lead to Japan?
Hopefully, but probably not all the roads, but I think enough roads will lead to Japan. And the way I see it is that because I don't think Japan can succeed alone. We need regional ties within Asia, but also to other continents like Europe and US. So hopefully it can be a catalyst or some form of bridge between those regions as a VC.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.